Chaim. Chaim, you open up the bottle. Or I can. Chaim. For Shalema. For Shalema. I surround myself with what I can have. That's also an art. L'chaim, l'chaim, everyone. L'chaim and l'bracha. Good Yom Tif. Start with a nigan. Ay 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 ay. Ay 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 ay, Pidyon ay ay ay, Pidyon ay ay ay, ay 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 ay. Ay 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 ay, Pidyon ay ay ay, Pidyon ay ay ay. Yeah, 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 hey, yeah, 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 hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 ay, 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 yeah, 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 Everyone should be blessed. All the blessings. It should be a Didon Natzach, which means our side has won. Hey Teves celebrates and commemorates a victory of holiness, a victory for Hashem, for God in this world, a very recent, relatively recent victory that has, as we shall see a little later, cosmic significance. And this went down in 1986, Tufshin Memzayin 57, 40, 57, 47. In the I think, or maybe it was already 1987. Could be it was after New Year's already. Anybody know the English date when it was? It was could be it was in 87 already. I think it was in the beginning of January of 87. started about 2 years earlier in 1985. There was the Rebbe, the previous Chabad Rebbe had a massive library. Rabbi Yosef had a massive library that he collected from his fathers and ancestors, going back 6 generations in Russia, um, both from their own manuscripts and their own writings, tons and tons of writings of theirs. Plus, they collected, being that they were the great rabbis in Russia of Russia Jewry and then a world Jewry. There was they as rabbis, Jewish rabbis, love books. Jewish people are known as the people of the book, especially the greatest scholars of the Jewish people. And Jews always were people who can afford, and people who they're able to would amass, and those who couldn't afford either. Yes, they would give away their last pennies, those who were scholarly, especially to amass books. The previous Rebbe had one of the largest libraries. Now, not all of the library he was able to take out when he went from Russia. A lot of it got stuck behind, and that's still a case going on, where there is still a massive amount of the previous Rebbe's library still held back in Russia, and we hope that any day they should come out, as the Rebbe called it, Pidyon Shevuyim, that the hostages should come out. This is a different type of hostages, holy books that for whatever reason Putin is holding on to, doesn't want to let go. I mean, we understand based on what we learn over here in the Hasidic teachings that when the unholy holds on to holiness, it gives it power. So we can understand he's holding back those books because for whatever reason, it still empowers the unholy. And somehow the Rebbe connected those books coming out of Russia with the coming of Mashiach. So we have no question that as Mashiach arrival, as Mashiach will be here, those books as well will make their way out of Russia. Now, but the previous Rebbe, when he came to America, in addition to part of his library that he brought from Russia, in addition to that, there was also, he amassed an enormous amount of books when he was here in the 1940s. So the library was a big library. And then it went over, obviously, after the previous Rebbe's passing in 1950. It was belonged to Agudas Chasidei Chabad that had that library. And in 1985, they noticed that certain books were missing from the library. And then they caught on that there was someone who was taking these books and was not returning them. And turns out that this was a relative. This was a grandson of the previous Rebbe. Through the other daughter. The previous Rebbe had 3 daughters. His oldest daughter's son was the one who was helping himself to these books. And again, I'm not knowledgeable in the entire story. I didn't even do my research today to get the full story, because this is not the point of this Farbrengen, what the logistics of the regular story was. But his claim was that he has partial ownership of that library, or he deserves part of it because he's an heir to the previous Rebbe. He's a grandson, and therefore it should go to him. This dispute ended up in court, and it ended up in the U.S. federal court. It dragged on for over a year, or for about a year. The fear was that they would call the Rebbe himself to have to testify. That itself was a miracle. That the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself did not go down to court, but he had to give what they call it a deposition. And in the end, on Hey Teves, which is today, 37 years ago, I think, it was handed down by the federal court, the rulership, that the books belong to the Chabad Hasidim, and the book is not private property that should be able to be claimed by the heirs, but rather it's a communal. It belongs to the community of Chabad, and that was the idea. And at that time, this caused incredible celebration. So we can understand that the Hasidim were in a lot of distress. The Rebbe himself was very upset about the whole story. The Rebbe spoke very strongly many times about, and one observing the story can see that it wasn't just a family dispute, but that there were spiritual dynamics behind this. This was a spiritual war. The Rebbe definitely saw it as a fight personally against the Lubavitcher Rebbe, kind of trying to remove the Lubavitcher Rebbe as Rebbe, kind of like to dismiss his leadership, because this belonged to the Chabad leaders. It was Chabad property, and if it was going to be taken, it was kind of a challenge to the Rebbe's himself, his leadership, and so on and so forth. And so it was about the books, and it was about the Rebbe himself, and the fact that on this day, on Hey Teves, there was a great victory. At that time, the Hasidim were celebrating. It was like utter madness. I was not there then. This was still before the days. I was 15 years old at that time. And this was still before the days. No, I was actually still for those, what was that, 1985? No, it's 1987. Yeah, no, I was 15 years old at that time. And I was not yet exposed to Chabad. I lived not too far from Chabad headquarters in Brooklyn, but I remember the discussion in Borough Park on the streets, how Lubavitch went crazy, how everybody is drinking and it's a party. And if you guys, anybody want to see madness and craziness, go to Chabad headquarters. The celebrations are off the charts. At that time, I had no understanding at all what it is. And the truth is, I will say that the Hey Teves Yom Tov, I never, okay, I can understand that the Hasidim who were so close to the Rebbe and so attached, and the Rebbe was in pain, and that the Rebbe had a relief that his books were kept by him, and obviously these books later are meant that everybody should be able to learn them. That's one thing, but you should know, we would know that by that time, I think most of the manuscripts that were printed as Hasidus were already printed. So it's not so much about these manuscripts needed to be printed. I'm sure there were some that were still in manuscripts that were still printed later. And I don't think that the threat was that they were going to take away the entire library from the Rebbe. So it was more, as we said, it's more of a spiritual kind of a battle. And I myself, all these years, never really understood the significance of this holiday. Of course, I participated in Farbrengens from time to time on Hey Teves. It's a Hasidic Yom Tov. I would go to Farbrengens. We never did a Farbrengen here on Hey Teves. I don't recall that we did so. And this year, kind of something clicked, and I'm feeling it much more than I've before. And this is what I want to share, because it's beginning to clarify in my mind that, and I always understood that there must be something cosmic, but never that I was able to wrap my mind around it. So I felt like the Hasidim who were there, and they witnessed the whole experience, and they can say what it was like at that time. And it was similar to Yutes Kislev when the Alter Rebbe came out of jail. It was almost like the seventh generation, the Rebbe's own personal jail time. Like it was like his own imprisonment. The Rebbe came out. So to go and listen to Hasidim who were there and experienced it, there's something to hear. But like me, as someone who, wasn't exposed to it, I didn't feel I have much to share on this Yom Tov, on this holiday. And again, but I do want to thank someone who shared with me a thought today in the morning, and which got me excited. I'm going to share that thought as the outline of today's Farbrengen, because that really is the outline of today's Farbrengen. But during the course of the day, I fleshed it out. I fleshed it out and added a lot of my own thoughts to because I asked him. I communicated with this fellow who sent me this, and I said to him, like, okay, so you're missing. There's some holes over here. There are like some major gaps. What's going on? And he said, we need to think about it. So I did some thinking today, and I have some undeveloped thoughts. It's still very raw, but I think it's worth sharing. And let's see where this Farbrengen goes and how it develops. But it's based on something that I said at a Farbrengen last week. It was a small Farbrengen in the other shul, which occurred to me while I was lighting my Hanukkah candles last week. We say, when we light the menorah, we say, Sha'asa nisim la'veiseinu, that Hashem made miracles to our forefathers. Whenever we celebrate miracles of the past, we say, Sha'asa nisim la'veiseinu. So in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, there is a there is a Torah, there's a teaching from the previous Rebbe, in which it says, "She'asa nisim l'avoseinu." No, there it doesn't say. There it's talking about vayamareru es chaye avoseinu. There it says that they bitter the life of our fathers, of our forefathers. So Chassidus, one of the things about Chassidus is that it takes, historical events and things that we speak about, detached experiences, and it makes it very personal. So when you learn about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you learn about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you really know that it's talking about you. You have Avram inside of you. You have Yitzchak inside of you. You have Yaakov inside of you. And then when we talk about Moshe Rabbeinu, we have Moshe inside of you, but you also have a Rebbe who's currently here, who is Moshe Rabbeinu. So we're not talking about like these detached biblical events that happen once. Chassidus brings everything to life. Because once you know the secret, you peel away the external and you realize that the internal aspects, these are ongoing, and it comes in different forms and different manifestations. If we live on the external level of things, then the external is stuck in time and space. But when you tap the soul of something, then you're far less limited. Then you can see its content, its meaning, its significance, its spiritual energy. So when it says that they bittered our fathers, simply you read the Agad and you hear about forefathers being whipped and beaten to build pyramids to Paro. But on a deeper level, it explains that Avoseinu means our mochen, our mind, our chachma, our bina are called our fathers. Vayamaru es chay Avoseinu means that our minds were emaciated. They were embittered because they weren't fed. Jews in Egypt didn't have what to feed their minds with. There was no Torah, there was no teachings. So their minds became very embittered because they were very constricted. And they had very, very limited vision. So I was thinking the opposite. She'asa nisim l'avoseinu, nes means lifting up. Lifting up, to lift up, l'avoseinu means to lift up our mochen, to lift up our mind, which means to have expansive vision. And it frustrates me very much when sometimes we look at these events and things that happen with the Rebbe, and we only interpret it within the context of Lubavitch. And it's beautiful. Lubavitch has a Yom Tiv and so on and so forth. I said many times when people said, do I see myself as a Lubavitcher? I'm not Spitz Chabad. I don't see myself as the extreme Lubavitch guy. We have Kalobach sessions over here. We have all kinds of different types of experiences over here. We'll do Breslov over here. We'll do this over there. I'm not a narrow, exclusive Lubavitcher. Here I wear a Streimel and so on and so forth. I didn't join the team because of Lubavitch. I came because in 1989, Mashiach energy was overtaking the world. I signed up for Mashiach. I didn't sign up for Lubavitch. If I need to be Lubavitch in order to have Mashiach, then I'm in the game as well. Lubavitch is nice to me, but it's not about that. Therefore, when things remain narrowed down to Lubavitch, good, have your party, say L'chaim, dance in your Lubavitch shtibel. To me, it has to be cosmic. To me, it has to be the world is changing. To me, the Lubavitcher Rabbeim are the pathway to Mashiach. This is the light. This is cosmic. This is far more powerful. And and that's why I need to find that connection, or else it doesn't speak to me. So someone told me in the street, he met someone. He said, Rabbi Wolf, he's not a Lubavitcher. He's a Mashiachist. He's in for Mashiach. That's his thing. And it's funny. It's a Litvish guy who told us, and I would say he's right. To me, it has always been from when I was a child, from when I connected to the Baal Shem Tov, but there was always this spark of Geula that needs to connect. So in that sense, what I got very excited about today is to see Hey Teves, She'asa nisim l'avoseinu, to pick up my mind and to pick up our minds and to see that the Rebbe's victory over here is a cosmic victory. It's part of the world events unfolding towards the Geula, not a personal. Because I actually had someone I used to be learning Tanya with a few years ago, a very Hasidic young man, not Lubavitch, and he loves Hasidus and everything. And he challenged me. He said, "I don't get Hey Teves." He says, "I understand how the Rebbe turned it into such a cosmic thing. It's a family dispute. Someone wanted to take away the books." He said, he wasn't trying to ask me a question. He says, "I don't get it. Like, why is Lubavitch and the Rebbe turned it into like some kind of like a war against God and a war against thing, and there was a victory. It was a family dispute. There's a family, there's possessions, he wants it, and who's going to get it, and so on and so forth. What's this deeper thing?" So therefore, it requires going in deeper and trying to look a little bit into the inner workings of it and to see what really is the story behind it. So today, Rabbi Yaakov Bach from Israel, he shares with me constantly. He has a website called Dvar Malchus something. Dvar Malchus in English. I can look at it. I'll tell you now. It's worth. I'm going to give him a plug. He does fantastic. Because a lot of times he just throws ideas into my head, and I love it. I'm giving him all the credit for this. For this. Now again, I'm not. Although I'm going to lay out the outline of what he said, I do feel I had some original thoughts over here. So it's a combination of what he shared and the construction that I added on today. But let me pull it up, his website, because he has a piece. This piece, you can look it up. Oh, his website is dvarmalchus770.org. Okay, dvarmalchus770.org, and he has all kinds of. He writes on every week's Dvar Malchus. So he sends me on you, and a lot, sometimes I look at. I actually did something else. Gimel Tammuz, I also did a piece, and I credited him because he has phenomenal insight. So this particular piece, caught my attention, and this is what I would like to share just as the outline, and then we'll take some breaks and we'll sing and we'll have and we'll build it up. But this was the thought that he brought to my attention. The Chabad Rabbeim are the trailblazers to Mashiach. If we want to go deeper, this is the family of Malchus Bais David. This is the kingdom, the Davidic kingdom restored. I've discussed this many times that the Malchus Bais David, the kingdom of Mashiach, David HaMelech's kingship fluctuates. It's like compared to the moon. The moon wanes and waxes. So the moon reaches its full 15th day of the year, calendar year. It becomes of the month, becomes full, and then it begins to decline till it withers out, and then the moon comes back again. So we find, the Zohar says, that from Avram Avinu until Shlomo Melech was 15 generations, and then that was when the moon was in its fullest. Then after Shlomo Melech, it starts to decline. Actually, it was another 15 generations till Tzidkiyahu. And when Tzidkiyahu is king, is the last king of the Davidic kingdom, and then it kind of withers away, and you don't see this kingdom visible in the world until it's going to return in the days of Mashiach. So it's interesting that with the Rebbe, I'm not going to go into this because I spoke about this many times, but in the opening of the Rebbe's first book that he published, which is the Hayom Yom, either the Haggadah Shel Pesach or the Hayom Yom. Do you remember which one was first? One of the two, but in any case, but the Hayom Yom is either the first or the second. It's a book with short little Hasidic insights, which, by the way, amazingly, Hey Teves is all about Melech HaMashiach and about how Mashiach is going to reveal. We're going to talk about that. How Mashiach is going to reveal the beauty of the simple people, and of their service and the greatness of simple submission, which is really part of this amazing idea of Hey Teves, as we're going to see soon. But in any case, in the Hayom Yom, in the introduction, the Rebbe starts with a biography of the Chabad Rabbeim. And as before he begins and opens the book on each teaching of each day, every day there's a nice Hasidic thought, which is meant to be the inspiration, the soul of the day. The Rebbe begins with a biography of the Chabad Rebbe. But as he starts with the first Chabad Rebbe, he mentions Reb Shneir Zalman of. He doesn't bring the Baal Shem Tov. It's interesting because this is meant for Chabad Hasidim. It's not a Hasidic for Hasidism in general. It's Chabad Hasidim, Yom Yom. It's Luach Yomi LeChasidei Chabad. So he begins it with the first Chabad Rebbe, although there were two Rabbeim before that. But yet, when it comes to the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe says that the ancestors of the Alter Rebbe, he traces the Alter Rebbe to the Maharal of Prague, to the 16th century Torah giant of Prague, the Maharal of Prague, Rabbi Yehuda Lowy. And he says that the Chabad ancestry originates with Rabbi Yehuda Lowy, the Maharal of Prague, who is a descendant directly to King David. Migeza HaGaonim, the Rebbe writes that Migeza HaGaonim, going all the way back to David HaMelech. Now, and the interesting thing about the Rebbe in Hayom Yom is that he doesn't just say that he comes from the Maharal from Prague. He lists all the names. It was Rav Moshe, Reb Shlomo, Everybody's name, Reb Baruch, every single name, which is kind of strange because the Alter Rebbe, we know, has his own yichus. The Alter Rebbe doesn't have to lean on the Maral of Prague. Although the Maral of Prague is an awesome, great Torah giant, but the Alter Rebbe kind of can stand on his own. It's like, it's not necessary to give him like, oh, why is the Alter Rebbe great? Because he's a grandson of the Maral from Prague. So why is the Rebbe insisting so much that he gives you, and he says every single name from the Maral? So it occurred to me is because from the Maral from Prague until the Alter Rebbe is 8 generations, and the Alter Rebbe is the 8th, and then the Alter Rebbe to the Rebbe is 14 generations. It's another 7. So when you count it all, the Rebbe is the 14th, which is the Malchus Bais David, and David is number 14. David HaMelech is 14. So this is the return of Malchus Bais David in the world. And this is based not just by people speculating. The Rebbe Rashab, in his talks in Torah Shalom, says, we are the Bais David. And on us it says, this is what the Rebbe Rashab says. And on us, referring to the Chabad dynasty, it says that your candle, your lamp, which God promises to King David, will never be extinguished. So the Rabbeim, the Alter Rebbe, these are paving the way for Mashiach, and we don't need more. How many times is it quoted in Chassidus that the Baal Shem Tov, when he began Chassidism, went up to the Heichal, to the chamber of Mashiach, and he said to Mashiach, "Emasai ka'asimar, when are you coming?" And Mashiach said, when your well springs will spread across the world. Now, if to be honest, which Hasidic group made it their thing to spread across the entire world and to teach Hasidism across the world? It has not been. No one took it. Hasidim grew. Many Hasidic dynasties had many followers, but to make it a Inyan and to get Yom Tov, to make it an Inyan and to do work, we might say to hustle to another cup, to hustle and to work in order to spread Hasidism across the world. It's Chabad that does it, and Chabad always the whole song, the whole concept of l'kashayafutzu menesecha chutza. It's not even a discussion elsewhere. You don't hear it amongst the Ruzhiner Hasidim. You don't hear it against Gur Hasidim. You don't hear it amongst Belz Hasidim. Chabad talks about spreading Hasidus across the world. So so it's clear that Hasidism and Mashiach are unified, are one and the same. Okay. Now, one of the things the Alter Rebbe, part of the Malchus Bais David, part of what the kings of David need to do is they have to yilchon milchames Hashem. They need to fight the wars of God. In other words, part of paving the way to Mashiach is to fight the dark forces that are going to try to impede on the Geula. So we find something interesting that from the first Chabad Rebbe, throughout all of Chabad history, there was always certain battles that they were fighting against forces of evil in the world. In Russia, against the Tzemach Tzedek was fighting against all the decrees of the czars and so on and so forth. The Alter Rebbe himself was put into prison. And many of the other Chabad Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, fought against the communist regime and so on and so forth. So there was battles, literal battles, and some of them reached ferocious points. So what we're going to really, really develop tonight is that there's really one massive battle that was fought. It started with the Alter Rebbe, and it was concluded in 1987 when the Rebbe won that victory. And it's with that the Rabbeim, the Chabad Rabbeim, took down the final opposition that stops the coming of Mashiach, the coming from the world. The forces of Sancherev in the world, the forces of a pure fight against God, to eradicate a fight of atheism, which was a war that was fought, and how it's connected to Hey Teves, we'll see in a moment. But this is a cosmic victory, and this was the victory, and this was the last straw that broke the camel's back of the forces of, and therefore after 1987, 1899, the Rebbe starts marching towards Mashiach in 1988. Mamish the year afterwards, in Tav Shemem Ches, anybody that follows the Sichos can see that in Tav Shemem Ches, the Rebbe goes full throttle Mashiach. And the sichos, the nature of the talks, completely take a whole new energy of Mashiach, so much that a lot of old Chabad Hasidim are bewildered with the new sichos of Tav Shem Ches, because the Rebbe kind of changes his note completely and goes completely Mashiach, because the forces of darkness that were blocking the Geula are already disintegrating, are coming apart. So let's for a moment go to the story of the song. The day is referred to as Dida Natzach. So when the Rebbe, when Dida Natzach means we won, and it's an Aramaic, we won. And it's a song that the Hasidim sang by the victory. They didn't just sing it by the victory. There was an old Chabad tune that was sung in Lubavitch. But then it didn't have words. It was and there was a niggin. It was sung. When the trial began in 1986, when the trial began, the Rebbe's trial with the books, Hasidim, some say it was Beryl Lazar, who attached the words Dida Notzach to the niggin, and they started singing it by the Rebbe's Farbrengen, and the Rebbe encouraged it very much. Not only that, the Rebbe spoke a lot during that time, about the significance of Dida Notzach, shouting Dida Notzach. Where does this come from? So it's a midrash, and the Rebbe himself brought the midrash. What's the midrash? The midrash is found both in Midrash Rabbah and in Midrash Tanchuma. The midrash says that one of the sages, I forgot his name, once came to a town, and he once was by he went to a certain, I always love when it's connected. He went to a certain spring, a Mayan, and he was sitting by that spring, by this Mayan, and a demon, a spirit came to him. And this demon came to him and he said, hello, how are you? And he said, hi, what's up? And the fellow says to him, listen here, I have a problem. I need your help. I've been here for many years. And I'm a very well-behaved demon. Because you know what? All the people in the town come to the spring. They come in the afternoon, they come in the evening, they come in the morning. Both you and your wives all come. And I keep to myself. I never harmed anybody. But there's a new demon who's trying to take over this place. He wants to evict me. There is a demon that's coming over here and is trying to evict me. This guy is a real cholera, this new demon. This guy is someone who's going to hurt people. He's a wild demon, and he's out of control. He wants to throw me out of here. And if he comes in over here, the people in the town are going to have a lot of trouble. So he said to him, so what can I do? What should I do? He says, go back to town and announce that anybody that has a hammer or all kinds of pots and pans and ladles, whatever you have that can bang and make a lot of noise, tell everybody to come here. I forgot what he said, in the morning time, the afternoon, I'm not sure when. I think in the morning. Come by the place, and when you're going to see in the water, that you're going to see the water. I think again, the midrash is twice. One time it's in Midrash Rabbah, as I mentioned, it's in Aramaic, and in Tanchuma, it's in Hebrew. So the Hebrew version is easier to understand, but it leaves out a lot of the story, a lot of the detail. The one in Aramaic, and I looked at it 5 minutes before I came here, and I didn't give a chance to really figure out all the Aramaic words, because you would have to take out a Medrash and look at the Mefarshim explain. But it seemed to me from what I read that when that's why I'm saying I'm not sure, but it seemed to me from what I read is when you're going to see like bubbles or rips or ripples in the water, then you know the demon is there. And what you should do is you should all start banging very, very loud on make a ruckus, bang and bang and bang, and yell, Dida Notzach, we won, our side won, and the demon will get scared. And you'll know that you chased them away when you'll see a little blood on the water. So this is what happened. They all gathered together the next day. They stood there, all the people at the next to the spring. And when they started seeing the bubbling, they all started banging and zetzing and screaming. And they yelled, Dida Notzach. And they. So the Rebbe, you see from here, the Rebbe was speaking about this event that was taking place kind of as some demonic force that he's fighting. In other words, the Rebbe wasn't seeing it just as his nephew making trouble, a family member making trouble. Now, by the way, you should know that it wasn't just the family member. There were people who didn't like Lubavitch. Like Lubavitch had a lot of not such people who are not too happy with Rebbe. Whenever you're here to do something godly in this world, you're going to get opposition. And the higher your work is, the loftier the opposition comes from. So these were extremely religious groups that really didn't like Lubavitch, and there's actually more than one. And thank God, lately things are turning over because we're getting closer to Mashiach. People are more friendlier than it was. But when those days, there was a lot of opposition. So one of these groups, not going to mention by names, were the ones who were instigating this whole opposition against the Rebbe. They're based and actually sent the Rebbe a letter that the Rebbe has to appear to Din Torah, to court. But it was very nasty what they were doing. It was like very ugly. So, but the Rebbe was seeing it as some kind of a spiritual fight, a war of demons against the forces of unholiness. And that's why the Rebbe was employing that the Hasidim singing Dida Natzach. That's what's going to fight this klipa. So we need to understand what is it? So what we really, I think what's important is to realize that when we see the Lubavitcher Rebbe down here below, we're not seeing any, we don't know what we're seeing. We're seeing, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is in heaven. He's in the spiritual worlds above fighting battles that we don't see. And down here below, we saw the Rebbe, as he's operating over here. And same as with all these Rabbeim. They're seeing things on levels that we are completely incomprehensible. So what's this demonic force that was being fought, and why is the Dida Natzach this great victory? So let's say L'chaim, and then we'll hopefully go through this little insight, and then after that maybe with some deeper Hasidic explanation on this whole idea. So L'chaim L'bracha, the main thing is it should be Dida Natzach, that Geula should finally beat the Golus, and the exile should fall apart, and it should be Dida Natzach for the IDF over the Hamas, complete obliteration, complete destruction, and all the enemies of the Jewish people should be disintegrated. Let me say of what Dida Natzach happened a few years ago. Soleimani was killed. The threat the great threat from Iran that was threatening the Jewish people was eliminated on when? On Hey Teves, yeah. So you see the energy of Dida Natzach, protection. He was a menace, a serious menace, a danger, an extreme danger. Probably with his death, the Iranian threat to Israel was diminished immensely because he's the mastermind. And sadly, they replenished themselves strong enough to be able to orchestrate this Hamas attack. And so today's, however, a day of that victory. So we see that the victory is imprinted in time. So let there be a victory for holiness. Let us be able to be victorious of our own Yetzer Hara, of our own. In Chassidus, it says that the Nefesh Bahamas, the animal soul, is also called a demon. There should be a Dida Natzach of our spiritual side over our own demons. L'chaim l'bracha, l'chaim l'bracha. Yemin Hashem Eroimeima Yemin Hashem Osachayil Yemin Hashem Eroimeima Yemin Hashem Osachayil Ladai Ladai ya 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 ya. Hashem Roimeima Yemin Hashem Osachayil Hashem Roi Meimo Yemeyin Hashem Oisachoyim die 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 na my lada my lada my lada die na my lada my lada I la ya la da my la da my la da I la da ya ma my oh ya la da I la da ya ma my oh ya la da Hashem Loi Meimo Yemeyin Hashem Sochoyim Hashem Loi Meimo Yemeyin Hashem Sochoyim Die la die la la die la la die die la la die la die ay 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 la da ay la da ay 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 la da ay la da ay ay la da ya ma oh ya la da oh la da yo hashel say l'chaim. Oh, yo, Lord, Chaim. Yemin Hashem Remeima, the right side of Hashem, which is kindness, which is divine revelation. Remeima, that's exalted. So there's the forces, however, on the other side, on the left, which is the forces to conceal and block God. So we know the Alter Rebbe passed away. His yahrzeit is in less than 3 weeks. Chabad Teves, also in the month of Teves, same month that Hey Teves comes out. So the Alter Rebbe, before his passing, was engaged in a spiritual battle against Napoleon. Spiritual and physical battle against Napoleon. When I say physical as well, because the Alter Rebbe actually took part in the physical war against Napoleon. The Alter Rebbe believed, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, believed that Napoleon would be detrimental to the Jewish people if Napoleon's victory, because Napoleon was bringing about a very early, the Jewish people were not ready yet for the being invited completely without any restrictions, living amongst the Gentiles and completely free, living a free life without any restrictions, because as we see that when Jews were kind of lived segregated, they kept their Judaism stronger. Once Judaism opened up, it opened up the doors for assimilation. And Napoleon was bringing a freedom to the Jewish people all across Europe, kind of all the decrees that of segregation and many other things that were keeping the Jewish people in a more constricted state were removed. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe at that time felt that if Napoleon is going to win the war, and the Jews in Russia, the millions, 100, I don't know how many Jews at that time were living in Russia, but we could say probably 1 million of Jews in Russia would be exposed to this immediate freedom, then the heart of the Jewish people would be drawn away from serving God, from being close to Hashem, from religiosity, and they would assimilate very much and very quickly into the culture, into the non-Jewish culture. And that was the Alter Rebbe's stand. But it was also deeper than that. Napoleon himself, as the Rebbe explained this in a talk on Parshas Vayeshev, in 57, 52, the Rebbe explained that Napoleon, what was representing the war wasn't only him. It was it was the movement of Enlightenment in Europe. And the movement of the overthrowing of the modernization of Europe, which meant the overthrowing the old system of a monarchy, of the government of absolute power that was the king's power, That was the idea of the French Revolution. Now, America also has the same idea of allowing the people to choose their own leaders, a democracy, as opposed to what's it called? As a what? A dictatorship, a king, a monarchy. The difference, however, between the United States of America and Napoleon, as the Rebbe explained, is that the United States desire of the original revolution in the United States was based that human beings have the right to freedom because God gives them that right. And it was based on a belief of God. It was deeply rooted in a belief in God and in a sense of what we might call Yiras Hashem, fear of God, and a sense of serving Hashem. However, the French Revolution was to overthrow all authority, including religious authority, which means even including God's authority. And therefore, basically, the call was humans and beings can do whatever they want. There is no... That was the early wokeism of that time. You do whatever you want. There is nobody to answer to. That's what Napoleon's war was representing. Napoleon himself was an atheist. He was not a religious person, or if he believed, he did. The czars of Russia were very strong Christian believers. They were no friends of the Jewish people. They caused enormous pain and suffering to the Jews, but they themselves were believers in God. As believers in Christianity at that time, the Christian faith and the Christian people of the Christian faiths were persecuting the Jewish people with all kinds of arguments against the Jewish people, and Jews suffered tremendously. But Napoleon, according to the way the Alter Rebbe saw it, was far greater danger, because Napoleon wanted to bring an atheistic belief, an overthrowing of God's authority in the world. And in that sense, the Alter Rebbe himself writes that Napoleon's the impurity of Napoleon is klipa Sancherev. It's the same klipa of Sancherev. Sancherev was a king of Assyria at that time, who believed, the Gemara says about him, is that he believed that he was God, meaning it wasn't like he had no authority over him. And that was this Napoleon had that, which is the ultimate opposition to God. And that's why the Alter Rebbe was fighting against Napoleon, not wanting Napoleon to win. So much so, as we said earlier, that the Alter Rebbe had his Hasidim help out in the war effort. Some of his Hasidim, especially notables, Ramoisa Meijlish, he spoke fluent French. The Napoleon's agents, scouts who came into Russia earlier befriended him. Somehow he befriended them. They trusted him. They shared with him secrets. He was acting as a spy for the Russian government. And in many ways, the great defeat that Napoleon had, even physically, in Russia, was because of these secrets that because we know Napoleon was defeated in Moscow. After he took Moscow, later he was defeated and he was kicked out and driven out. This was after his it was a lot to do with the Alter Rebbe had a lot to do with it. Now the Alter Rebbe himself was so against Napoleon that when Napoleon crossed into Russia and was coming to the Ukraine where the Alter Rebbe was, the Alter Rebbe fled. Not because he was afraid that Napoleon would physically harm him, but rather because he did not want to be under the authority of Napoleon. In other words, he didn't want to live under his, in other words, because it was such a force of impurity, Napoleon, that the Alter Rebbe didn't want. He was such a klipa that the Alter Rebbe said, I don't want the contamination of this evil, of this force of darkness against God. I don't want to be on it. And the Rebbe himself says that it seems like that this actually caused the Alter Rebbe to pass away, because the Alter Rebbe ran away from Napoleon. They ran into a fierce cold winter, deep into Russia. Not being home and traveling and constantly being on the run was what caused the Alter Rebbe to fall ill, and the Alter Rebbe passed away on Chabad. So we can say that the Alter Rebbe gave his life to win this war. The Alter Rebbe promised that Napoleon would lose, because the Alter Rebbe was fighting. It seemed like Napoleon was winning, and the Alter Rebbe fought spiritually until he made a shavua. He made an oath that Napoleon will lose, and he told his children this. The people were crying. The Middle Rebbe describes he was crying because when Napoleon came into Moscow, it was so frightening, and the Alter Rebbe made a shavua that time that Napoleon will fall. And basically, he kind of gave his life up to win this battle against Napoleon. So what was the Alter Rebbe fighting? A force that wanted to eradicate religion and belief in God from this world. Fine. Now, the Rebbe said something interesting, that because of that, it's a very phenomenal thing. The Rebbe spoke in this phenomenal talk, that France always represented this klippa. A klippa, a klippa means a shell, a force of darkness that is anti-God, anti-holiness. And therefore, the first 3 generations of Hasidism kept away from France. In other words, even though Hasidism was meant to spread to world Jewry everywhere, they did not make any efforts to infiltrate into France, because France was considered such a force, such an impure place, such a place of such opposition to holiness, that the Rebbe, that Hasidus cannot go there. However, the Rebbe said, after 2-3 generations of Hasidism, of a lot of Hasidic, of serving God with the ways of Hasidism, which means spreading godliness into this world, intensifying the powers of holiness, you realize that when Jews learn Torah and do mitzvahs, we increase God's presence in this world. We increase the powers of holiness to weaken the power of the unholy. When you do it with Hasidic, from a Hasidic perspective, so your every mitzvah is done with so much more power, because Hasidism is rooted in the inner light of Torah, so it has so much more potency and so much more energy. So as a result of that, after a few generations, we softened up. We were ready to infiltrate into France. So the Rebbe then in that talk says that the 4th Chabad Rebbe, Reb Shmuel, actually traveled to France. There's a whole story with him going into a casino. It's a whole story. And he was there, I think, more than once. Externally, I think the reason was because of health reasons. He traveled to various... The Rebbe Marash was very ill. Physically, he had a lot of physical ailments. So he went to certain treatment centers and so on and so forth. But spiritually, he went to France on purpose, because to begin the rectification of France and its sublimation. The Rebbe says the Rebbe Marash started, and then his son, the Rebbe Rashab, went there. The 5th Chabad Rebbe, Reb Shalom Dov Ber, went there more than once. Went there a couple of times, and he wrote Hasidus over there. And he actually began one of the great monumental works of Hasidism called Ayin Bais, which was the most deepest Hasidus. The Rebbe Rashab started. The whole concept of it came to him when he was in France, in a place called Meneton. And that's where he started writing it. So all of this, you realize when the Rabbeim are sitting and writing Hasidus in a country, they're breaking the klippas of those countries, and they're elevating, they're attracting the spark of holiness that's there. The Rebbe then continues to say that the 6th generation of Chabad Hasidim, the Friediger Rebbe, intensified the work even more than his father, and especially by sending family members. Family members, the Rebbe is referring to himself, who was the son-in-law of the previous Rebbe. The Rebbe lived in France for 8 years, him and his Rebbe. And during that time, looks like the Rebbe was doing this enormous work of transforming France. The Rebbe says, take a look what's going on. And this amazing talk the Rebbe says in Parshas Vayeshev, take a look what's going on. France, which was just a place that was so anti-holiness and godliness, take a look that the Jewish community flourished. And now he says there are yeshivas there, and Hasidim there, and they print their own books of Hasidism, and they are a source of inspiration for people, for other communities around the world. They're like a headquarters on their own. The Rebbe says this is an unbelievable change in France, that Hasidism took Judaism in general, and Hasidism in particular, took such a hold in a country which was so antithetical to anything godly and holy. The Rebbe says it reached its peak. Here's amazing. That in 1974, the Rebbe says that Hasidim started singing the Marseille March. the song, dun, 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 which is the French national anthem, Hasidim took that song and started singing it for Hadaras V'Amuna L'Chayei Lamed. In other words, which is a song which declares that all greatness is to the all eternal one, giving praise to God. It's total opposite what France stood for, the ultimate worship of man, worship of human knowledge and human talents and human beauty and human fashion and human and the human being could do whatever he wants. Here, the song of the national anthem, which was actually started, that song was created at the time of the revolution. The Rebbe says this very song, Hasidim started singing it to the words praising God. That there is V'Amuna L'Chayei Lamed. And when the Rebbe says Hasidim started singing it, it's the Rebbe that started singing it at the Farbrengen, I think, right? The Rebbe was the one who started. There's V'Amuna L'Chayei Lamed at the Farbrengen. And the Rebbe says something amazing happened. A few weeks later, for a reason unknown, the Rebbe says, but known to us Hasidim, is the French decided to change the tempo of the song. And the Rebbe says, why did the French decide to do that? They have a song for so many years. It's because they sensed that the Hasidim stole that song, that the holiness extracted that song and turned it into holiness. They felt that song was taken away from them, so they're trying to wrestling with their own song. This is what the Rebbe said. And an amazing talk. This was like one of the last talks of the Rebbe, meaning the last 10 talks of the Rebbe. The Rebbe is talking about the transformation of France. And the Rebbe says, with France being elevated, we completed the elevation of the world. Kind of. That was the gist of that talk. Now, it's interesting. During that talk, in the footnotes of that talk, the Rebbe says, and here's the whole crux of this amazing teaching. In the footnotes of that talk, the Rebbe says a story that when the Alter Rebbe was running away from Napoleon, Hasidim, or maybe it was before he left, Hasidim came to the Alter Rebbe and they related to him that Napoleon is crossing over the border into Russia. And they told the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe inquired which song were they singing, because the people heard the armies of Napoleon marching. Which song were they singing? So they weren't singing this Marseille song. They were singing what's known in Chabad as Napoleon's March. Napoleon's March. The Alter Rebbe listened to the song, and the Alter Rebbe said, it's a song of victory. And the Alter Rebbe gave a sigh when he said it. It's a song of victory, meaning they're up to something. The Alter Rebbe can sense that Napoleon's armies, they're marching to victory. They have an energy of victory. This is a very dangerous force. They got a power of victory with them. But the Alter Rebbe went into a very, very deep dveikus. Means he was in a deep trance. When he came out of the trance, he said as follows. The Alter Rebbe said, Soif kol soif, at the very end is going to be Didan Notzach. We're going to win. And that's the first time these words Didan Notzach were used in the context of Chabad Hasidism. The Rebbe is quoting we would think Didan Notzach is the Rebbe's. It's a phrase that the Rebbe grabbed from the Medrash and used it in this war. The Rebbe is saying that the Alter Rebbe said, Soif kol soif, not yet. In the end, is going to be Didan Notzach. In the Ha'aris of Yosef, you can look inside. The Rebbe brings the story, and the Rebbe says, Ki yadu, as it is known that the Alter Rebbe said. So the Rebbe is connecting it to what's happening now. That the beginning of the Alter Rebbe's war against Napoleon took 200 years for it to be completed. Now that France is transformed, that's part of what the Alter Rebbe is meaning when the Alter Rebbe says it's going to be Didan Notzach. But can we now take those words Didan Notzach and connect it to the Rebbe's Didan Notzach? To the Hey Teves Didan Notzach? Is there a relationship? Because they're using the same term. It's our side winning against the forces. Now, to go a little deeper, the reason why Napoleon is in other words, Napoleon is because he's Napoleon. He wants to conquer the world. He wants to whatever. He has his ideas. He's seeking power. But what's the spiritual reason behind it? He is the opposition of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is here to implement God's kingdom in the world. This is the beginning of the restoration of Malchus Bais David. of the kingdom of God. So there's going to be someone who's going to be the arch enemy of that, who's going to try to throw off the yoke of God from when Mashiach will come. God's kingdom will be felt across the entire world. So here there's going to be a force that's going to come to try to remove Hashem's kingdom from the world, free the world from God's kingdom. And that's why there was such an animosity from the Alter Rebbe against Napoleon. Even though you think about it, the Alter Rebbe kept the Tsar in power, which caused who knows how much physical suffering to the Jewish people. Yet it was all worth it to fight Napoleon. But again, it took a few generations until France was liberated kind of spiritually from this Napoleon effect. Now, it doesn't mean that all of France is so perfect. We know there's a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of darkness there. But whatever was needed to prepare France for Mashiach, that it can be a place where there are communities studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, that's what counts. And that's what happened. Fine. But here is where this fellow who sent me this concept, here is where he inserts his interesting insight. And he says like this: at the very same time that the later Chabad Rabbeim, primarily the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, and the 6th Chabad Rebbe, managed to infiltrate France and win the war in France, flip France over, at the very same time, the French atheistic belief hit back precisely where? In the home of the Alter Rebbe. In other words, it was an exchange of energy. In other words, they came and took over and transformed in France, but what happened in Russia itself? In the days of the Rebbe Rashab, the revolution in Russia took place, the communist revolution. And the communist revolution is a continuation in some ways to Napoleon. It also wants to throw off government, any kind of any type of, it also wants to give the rule to the people. That's kind of the idea of communism, sharing everything, and the people are the power, which obviously never turned out to be that way, at least in Russia. It's idea, but that was the ideal. And also it seek to eradicate the same idea, seeking to eradicate God. And that's why they went against all clergymen in Russia. They arrested all clergy, Jewish and non-Jewish, but particularly they put tremendous effort on eradicating Judaism, and they fought the war to erase God's name in Russia. So basically, Napoleon's seeds, the Alter Rebbe seeds, go into France, but Napoleon's seeds infiltrate into Russia. And who are they fighting against? Who's left there? The descendant of the Alter Rebbe, the 6th Chabad Rebbe. He is left. The 6th Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, is left to fight the battle against the 6th Chabad Rebbe. He is left to fight the battle against the anti-messianic energies that are fighting in the world, the forces that are coming to fight Mashiach in the world. Why? Okay. So now, what happens? For 70 years, they arrested the previous Rebbe, and they shut down all the yeshivas in Russia, and all Judaism, and they didn't allow, and all Judaism had to go underground. And the previous Rebbe fought that fight. Friedrich Rebbe was put into prison. But we know the Rebbe says that when the previous Rebbe was taken into prison, and in the end, he was released from prison in 1927. Amazing teaching, the Rebbe says. Amazing teaching, the Rebbe says that at that time when the previous Rebbe was arrested, and when he came out of prison, he really stuck a dagger into the heart of the Soviet beast. He really destroyed them then. He gave them a death blow. However, it took 60 years until the entire apparatus came collapsing down. But it was from 1927 to 1987, a little bit over 60 years, until the Russian beast this collapsed and was broken. But it was really the battle of the Rabbeim. And take a look what happened. The Soviet regime collapsed, and Russia is filled with Chabad houses, filled with Torah teaching. In other words, who won? Judaism won, godliness won in Russia. But here is the amazing story. This is the connection that he makes. 1985, when the Svarim, the books, started to be missing, they started noticing for the first time books in the library were missing, was in the winter of 1985. It was exactly during that time March in 1985 was a month after the whole story with the Svarim started. What we're doing is we're connecting this story. Why? At that time, the leader of Russia that preceded Gorbachev, I'll tell you his name right now. No, the leader of right before. Give me a second. Yeah, the one who was right before. Hold on, give me a second. I'll give it to you in a second. List of leaders. Oh, Konstantin Chernenko. Chernenko was before Gorbachev. He died on March 10th, 1985. That was 2 weeks after the story of the Svarim started. The fight with the Rebbe, this is 1985. Who went in instead of him at that time? Gorbachev. Okay. The court case went from 1986 till 1987. In January of 1987, on Hey Teves, the U.S. federal court gave the books. Chabad won the case, and the books were legally handed over to Lubavitch. This was the great victory that we're celebrating today. 2 weeks after. Now, again, I'm not sure which day of January it is. If you want to look up, anybody want to look up when Hey Teves happened? What? Oh, it was January 6th. Okay. Oh, notorious day in the United States. It was January 6th. So 3 weeks later, January 28th of 1987, Gorbachev, watch this, began the first actions that he did to take down the communist, the Soviet Union. What happened? I'll tell you even what happened exactly. He has it over here in his footnotes. I mean, I told you where I'm saying this from. Here it is. He says, at the January 28th, 30th of 1987 Central Committee Plenum, Gorbachev suggested a new policy of democratization, whatever, throughout Soviet society. He proposed that future Communist parties' elections should offer a choice between multiple candidates, which was different than what it was, and elected by secret ballots, so that people are comfortable to vote who they really want to vote for. Also, Gorbachev also radically expanded the scope of what's called glasnost, which means stating that no subject was off limits for open discussion in the media. It's free press, which all these things is what, the fact that the media can actually discuss certain things, which obviously the communists, like in North Korea, you can't say anything. It was a complete, so that happened during that time. So these were in February, a few days later in February, dozens of political prisoners were freed. So the movement to shift and to change the Soviet Russia was mamish at the time of Dida Natzach. And he's talking about breaking a klippa, fighting. It was the same klippa that the Alter Rebbe was fighting, which later translated into Russia, the klippa sancherev, if we might call it, an atheistic belief, to fight against the Eibishter and to God. At the same time, which 2 years later led to the complete disintegration of the Soviet Union, and Russia was what we have today, but no more the Russia of the past, as a fight, as a regime against God and against Judaism. Now, if you think that this is okay, 3 weeks later, who says it has a relationship? Who says it's connected? The final document that dismantled officially the official dismantling of the Soviet Union happened on Hey Teves 57-52. This is called the I can't even read these words. The Belovezh Accords were signed by Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia in December 1991, effectively declaring the demise of the Soviet Union. The final ratification by the Russian Federation took place on December 12th, which was Hey Teves.
Wow.
So you're talking about, so I'm saying, we're talking about the victory against Napoleon and what the Alter Rebbe started, where the Alter Rebbe said, Di Dan Notzach. The Alter Rebbe said, Soif kol soif, in the end, there will be Di Dan Notzach. There will be a Di Dan Notzach. There will be ours will win. When he saw Napoleon, he said Napoleon was winning now. But in the end, there will be an ultimate victory against the forces of, on Hey Teves. When the Rebbe had his victory, 2 weeks later, it started the demise of the Soviet Union. It collapsed 2 years later, but the full destruction of it was 5 years later. But on Hey Teves, the Rebbe made mention of it in one of the sikhs. The Rebbe said recently, in the last couple of days, they moved the capital from Moscow, from Leningrad, back to Petersburg. They moved, or they changed the name. They changed the name from Leningrad to Petersburg, and they moved the capital out of there, which by the Rebbe, that meant it's over. That the Medina Ahu, that old country, that force is gone. So the last vestige of a force that's still standing against the Eibishter, against godliness in the world, was disintegrated, was won on Hey Teves. The only question is, what we need to understand, what does it have to do with the United States Federal Court? What does it have to do with the books? In which sense? So on what he says over here, which I'm sharing his thoughts, was that, because when I asked him today, I said, so how do you explain it? He said, oh, that still needs some thinking. But when I read his article, he first sent me a short version, then I read the longer one. He says something, but again, it doesn't suffice for me. So I want to share a much longer explanation soon, if you hang around. But what I do want to say is the connection that the pashtus on the simple level is that the Hey Teves, the war against the Svarim, wasn't really about the Svarim. It was really to kind of delegitimize the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It was, the Rebbe said it's a war against them Benkel, against my chair. And if you think about that, if you're talking about a dynasty of Malchus Bais David, of kingship, so the war against God is against that dynasty. It's against that Malchus. So in a sense, this was the biggest, even Napoleon, it's so interesting. Napoleon was seeking, he brings over here, interesting, Napoleon was seeking to go to Jerusalem. He went actually 13 years before he came up to Russia. At that time, he went to Israel. There's a famous story that we met Rabbi Nachman of Breslov during his visit in Israel. But Napoleon was seeking, and he was seeking for Jerusalem. Why? Because again, it's an anti-Mashiach moment, Napoleon, of force. But in the end, he never made it to Jerusalem, and he never made it to conquer Jerusalem. But the fight was against Jerusalem. And therefore, the fight is against Yerushalayim, and the fight is against the Melech mi Beis David, against the family of the Malchus Beis David. And therefore, this final, you're talking about a demon. The Rebbe is fighting a demon. He's fighting a ruach, a spirit. It's taking on different forms. It takes on the form of creating a family member who's going to fight to knock the Rebbe off from his leadership. So the winning of those books, which was the one on this day, is a victory of Mashiach. It makes a lot of sense. Why in the Hayom Yom of which the Rebbe wrote? Think about it. Hayom Yom, the Rebbe is writing 50 years before the story happened, or 40 years before the story happened, and the Rebbe is already saying that this day is all about Melech HaMashiach and about he will explain the Haidah. So this is again the dot that this fellow in Yerushalayim, I think he lives in Eretz Yisrael, who sent me today, and that's what got me excited. However, the question is, what does it really have to do on a deep, deep fundamental level? What does it have to do with the victory of the books? What is the significance of Hey Teves? What does it mean to us? Why was the fight to take away the previous Rebbe's library from the Rebbe? And where it really always bothered me about Hey Teves, and this is really where I want to go with this Farbrengen, is what always bothered me about Hey Teves is that if you look in the discourses, including the Hayom Yom, the Hayom Yom, which is the teaching, which we as Hasidim believe it's the soul of the day. The Rebbe captures the neshama of the day. And we know that there are such secrets in the Hayom Yom, why every day is like Punkt Gimel Tammuz. The Rebbe talks about Jews giving a sigh. If there's ever a day that Chabad Hasidim are going to sigh, it's Gimel Tammuz. And on days that you see so many like days that you see literally the Rebbe is foretelling the future. And we still don't know, we have no idea what kind of secrets are in the Hayom Yom. But you see, but when you look in the Hayom Yom, what the Rebbe is emphasizing is the energy of the day, is the energy of the simple people. That Mashiach, that scholarlism and study and learning has a limit. The mind has a limit. But the simple people, with their simple acknowledgement of holiness and godliness, their simple surrender, that has no limitations and no boundaries. And only Mashiach Tzedkenu himself is going to reveal the incredible quality of the simple people. This is what the Rebbe talks about. Now, you can say, why is this come out on Hey Teves? Why? Because it comes out in Parshas Vayigash. And this week's Hey Teves is usually this week's Parshas Vayigash. Vayigash, we have a confrontation between Yosef and Yehuda. And in Hasidus, it explains that Yosef represents the side of Judaism that's full of self-development, of study and learning and understanding and scholarship. That's Yosef. Yehuda represents surrender, nullification, abnegation, humility, subservience, servitude, responsibility, everything in which you're serving. The surrender of self, not the development of self. So in Hasidus, it explains that when you have Yosef and Yehuda together, Parshas Vayigash, although in the Parsha it seems to imply that Yosef has the upper hand, but the truth is that Yehuda is really the victor. That the ultimate king of the Jewish people is going to be Yehuda. Okay? All the Maimorim the Rebbe gives out for Hey Teves, like the Rebbe would give out discourses and say discourses and later printed discourses for this time, the theme is all about how action is greater than Torah. How Maisa, a deed of a mitzvah, which is a simple subservience to God, is greater than Torah. So what always bothered me, which didn't make any sense, is how come Hey Teves, out of all, what it becomes a celebration of Torah books and of Torah study, which seems not to make any sense. But the celebration should be mitzvah campaigns. If there was ever a day that we should highlight the Rebbe's mitzvahim, going over to simple Jews who don't know anything about Judaism and doing with them a mitzvah, that should be. And yet that's the Yud Beis Tammuz, a mitzvahim, the other holidays that stand for that energy. And Hey Teves is go buy yourselves books and Torah books, which is a library, which is learning. Yet the very energy of the day is the superiority of the overlearning. So it doesn't seem to make any sense. So this all is understood with a great depth to explain why, what was the deeper meaning of the war of the Sfarim. It has to do with the incredible interplay between these two dynamics of Yosef and Yehuda. For that, however, we have a shir over here for 3 hours to Farbrengen, to get to it and to develop it. Meanwhile, we'll say l'chaim, and you'll hang around, see if how much I can keep you here. L'chaim. L'chaim. My YouTube audience, they're going to sit with me till the morning. Yes, l'chaim.
I thought you were going to say that also the fact that this whole thing came through the Rebbe's house itself.
The what?
The fact that the whole Taina came from the Rebbe's house.
Yeah, from the household.
That's also a question, because if Hey Teves is coming to do a tikkun of like the other side, what does the Rebbe's house have to do with this? What's the shayla?
That is explained in Chassidus that the higher something is, the opposition has to come from a place that has a deeper connection to holiness. The klipa has to grab onto something holier. That's why it says that before Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah by Shavuos, which was when we went out of Mitzrayim, since it was only the revealed Torah, much lower level of Torah, the opposition came from the Bnei Cham. The Jews were enslaved by Mitzrayim. It was the force that was blocking and enslaving and trying to stop Matan Torah, if you can say, extinguish the Jewish people before they can go take the Torah, was not even relatives to the Jewish people, Bnei Cham. This Galus, which is going to reveal the secrets of the Torah, Mashiach's Torah, which is much higher than the Torah we got them, the Galus is amongst the Bnei Edom and Yishmael. These are family members. These are cousins already, which means because they have so much more power. Yutes Kislev, since it was in the Pnimis HaTorah, the highest, Hasidus is the highest. So its opposition came from Jews. Not even from cousins, it came from Misnagdim, came from Jews. But the Yetzer Hara used Jews because and in this case, it had to be family itself. So the deeper you come to something more pneumistic and higher, the opposition comes from a more inner place. Yeah. Yes, that's the way it works. L'chaim, l'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Wow. Still, the question is, what's the shaykhut between that and the Russians? Like the Rebbe's family was always fighting against.
Oh no! So we made that connection.
Right.
The connection was that we spoke about earlier is that there's one klipa. There's the klipa of atheism, a complete denial of God. It started with Napoleon. The Alter Rebbe fought him, and the Alter Rebbe's family infiltrated into France. But at the same time, they infiltrated into Russia, and that translated as a communist. Right. In a sense, let me add something really special that he says, which I think also needs Yashloimar. Before I get into a deeper explanation, or I might say my own chedushim regarding this whole thing, but let me share just something. He says once Russia was taken down and France was transformed and all these things, there's no real klipa left anymore. There's nothing, the Rebbe says, avodas habirurim, there's nothing that needs to be refined anymore. There's nothing that needs to be elevated. Now you'll have klipas Amalek. Amalek is when Kedusha is rolling, when the tanks of Kedusha is rolling, Amalek will get up and try to fight it with whatever it takes. But it's not because it's something that is, has another idea. It's just fighting holiness. It's not because it wants a different type of life. It just can't stand that holiness. When holiness is going to win, when Jews went out of Mitzrayim and the Jewish people were on a roll to Har Sinai, Amalek is going to come to fight and stop it. But it's not that Amalek has an interest to live a godless life. It's not about that. It's just about fighting holiness. And therefore, Amalek, you can't fix them. All others you can fix. They have an ideology. You can change their ideology. You can transform the ideology. You can sublimate them. Amalek you have to destroy. So what you're seeing now, Hamas, is a pure desire to kill Jews before Mashiach comes. It's a desire to take Eretz Yisrael, not to allow the Jewish people to have Eretz Yisrael, to fight and kill Jews and murder Jews. Amalek has another clip. What does he do to the Jewish people? To the Jewish people, he casts doubts. That's how Amalek is Gematria Suffolk. He casts doubts. So basically, the real klipa that happens now to the Jewish people, the Rebbe said everything is finished. We're ready to go to the Geulah. What happens to us? The Rebbe's own, we get full of doubts if the Rebbe knew what he's talking about, if the Rebbe didn't over predict, over promise. Think about it. It's sad that there's almost like this general consensus amongst the Rebbe's own chassidim that the Rebbe overpromised. Like the Rebbe, he told us we're already sitting, and maybe we don't know what the Rebbe meant. He was talking somewhere in the Himmel. He was talking somewhere in sky, in the Himmel. We don't know what happened. And there was actually people, there's a klipa that creates, this is a very dark klipa that creates doubts for thousands of chassidim, of the Rebbe's own followers, if the Rebbe's Mashiach message is still put. That's Amalek. It basically, you're already at the Geulah. There's nothing left. Right now, all we need to do is go receive Mashiach Tzidkenu, And now we begin to question, is he, yeah? Did he really say it? Did he mean it? Was he maybe just kidding when he said it? Or maybe he was hoping and God didn't really speak to him, but he thought Hashem spoke. I don't know what kind of narishkeit. But if when you look at the sikhs, you see clearly what the Rebbe is saying. We're ready to roll. Guys, we're ready to roll. Suddenly we all get cold feet. I'm not saying it's just God. Suddenly it's because Gimel Tammuz happens and the Rebbe and doubts happen. But when doubts happen, that's what gives power to forces that are just going to fight you. Because when you're insecure, that's what the Pasuk Rashi says. When the Jewish people doubted Ayesh Hashem b'kerbeinu, when we doubt Ayesh Mashiach b'kerbeinu, it's mamish to say. When Yidden doubted, it's God with us. What happens? Vayavay Amalek. Amalek comes. So when we doubt Hayesh Mashiach b'kerbeinu, what's Hayesh Hashem b'kerbeinu? Hashem is b'kerbeinu through Mashiach tzedkeinu. If we have that suffix, maybe he's here, maybe he's not. Maybe the sichos of Nun Aleph Nun Beis are true. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the Rebbe was, I don't know what people are doubting. But whatever the explanation is, what the doubts are, it creates an Amalek situation. So this is the frightening thing that this guy added today, which I thought was, it's neat, but also frightening. He says, the leader of this whole attack, we know is Sinwar. He says Sinwar in Arabic is spelled with a shin. It's the same letters as Shneir. In other words, the first name of the Alter Rebbe. In other words, you're dealing with a war. Again, the Alter Rebbe is this. This is the Geula. This is Mashiach. This is the Geula. This is Hasidism. This is the ultimate victory. Huh? Yichya, which is also Yichya. Yeah, it's the klippa of Yechi. It's the klippa of Malchus, and all it is the fight. Anyway, this was his chiddush. Okay, I just want to say briefly. Maybe we'll do a quick outline of what I was thinking, and then to explain the shaykhus of all of this. The shaykhus of all of it. I literally going to wrap it up in a nutshell, and then I'm going to try to unpack it. So, like this, at least if you can't stay around, you can at least get the nutshell. The nutshell is that there is two Judaisms almost. There is two perspectives, just like this in the parsha we see there is Yosef and Yehuda. There is two forces in Judaism. One force is the force, the system. It's a cosmic system that has Yosef at the head of the system. And from that perspective and from that system, the energy is the leader is the leader is Yosef. There's another system which is a Mashiach system. And that's the future system. And that's Yehuda system, where it's an entire different perspective on existence. The Yosef system is rooted in the external of the Ein Sof. They're both God divine systems. The Yosef system is rooted in the external of the Ein Sof. The Yehuda system is rooted in the essence of the Ein Sof. The Alter Rebbe is the one who begins the introduction of the Yehuda system. And just very briefly, the Yosef system is a system of Metzias. It's based on development of self. A Judaism that's based on refinement, making the most of who you are. It's what we might call, what you might get when you go into the Litvish world and you're taught about refining yourself, growing, making all the best you can be, refining your character, becoming a Talmud Chacham, becoming a scholar, becoming a great person. And you should know, sometimes to a Hasidic person who just was born on Hasidism, he just doesn't get it. Since when is it a virtue to become anything? Isn't it all about being not? That's because you've been hooked on the Alter Rebbe's hook. The Alter Rebbe was the one who fished you out on his hook. On the Alter Rebbe's system, the all of Judaism is, if you take all of Judaism and you want to boil it down to one word, it's bittul, nullification. It's non-beingness, because that's Yehuda and that's Malchus based of it, and that's the future system. And that's the system coming from the essence of God himself, where there cannot be anything but God. And therefore we see all of existence, the Alter Rebbe's entire philosophy. Yankel, you missed everything, Yankel. The ganze Torah, you missed everything. I knew he's going to...
No, he was listening to you.
Ah.
He was listening.
L'chaim.
Fine.
If you take all of... If you take...
We have the real thing.
If you take the Alter Rebbe system, the Alter Rebbe system in Yiddishkeit is the system that is Chassidus, the emanation is Ein Oid Mulvade, there's nothing but God. And therefore, everything is bittul, not mitzias, not being. In Judaism itself, these two systems are Torah and mitzvahs. Because they're both Kedusha. It's not dealing with something that's not holy. It's just there's two layers of existence. There is a layer of Talmud, which is Yosef, which is the Chitzonius of Elokus, which measures everything based on quality, measures everything based on reason and value. It's based on values and so on and so forth. But then there is a much deeper system, where the system is not based on anything but on what God wants. The Alter Rebbe this week in Torah Or puts it as the difference between the Mishkan and the Bais Hamikdash. The Mishkan is built, which was the permanent dwelling, the tabernacle, which was the permanent dwelling of God. The Mishkan belongs, not the permanent, the temporary dwelling of God, which was a tent. The substance of what the Mishkan was made out of was primarily made from animal and from plant, from trees and from plant, cedar woods and plant. A little bit was made out of inanimate object, which is the dome. Very little bit, just the floor. However, the Bais Hamikdash, which is the ultimate place, is made completely out of stone. So the Alter Rebbe explains, because the Mishkan is based on the current system until Mashiach comes. And on the current system until Mashiach comes, the order is that the domain, the inanimate, is the lowest existence, the least connected to God, because it's just material and physical. There's nothing to it. The Tzomeach is higher. Tzomeach is plant, which is higher. And Chai is even higher. In other words, it's a system that values the spiritual worlds much more than the physical. Because the spiritual worlds are far more refined than the physical. The higher you go up into spirituality, the more refinement you have. And that's a system, that's the system of refinement, and that's the power. If you think about Yosef HaTzadik, you think about a person who's in every situation, he scores 100% on every test. He never fails. He's always perfect. He's always making it to the passes all the tests. He's full of charisma. He received all the Torah from Yaakov. He makes it to be the king of Mitzrayim. His name, Yosef, means to add continuously. He's the ultimate, to put it in terminology that you might be familiar with. He is the ultimate steiger. Talk about steiging, you have to steig away. He's the ultimate steiger. If there's anybody who becomes a gadol, who becomes a great man, steiging, it's Yosef. And this is a system that I grew up with, and this is a system that Jews have throughout all the years. Who is the greatest? The rabbi is the greatest. The scholar is the greatest. That's the value, because the more refined you are, the more elevated you are, the more knowledge you have, and so on and so forth. And that's true. What?
Wasn't it the opposite? That's why Yosef was able to rule Mitzrayim, because he was the one that had the shaykhs to the Gashmis.
He was able to have a shaykhs to Gashmis because he was so refined. But it was all related to a level of refinement. Yehuda, on the other hand, if you take a look at Yehuda's life, the word Yosef means to add, Yehuda means to submit. And when you look at Yehuda, you see that Yehuda doesn't have shining moments. He actually, the only story that Torah tells about him is a very embarrassing story. What's the greatness of Yehuda? The greatness of Yehuda is not that he passed with flying colors. The greatness of Yehuda was that he was willing to put the lives of 3 people in front of his life. He was willing to embarrass himself to put someone else before him. He admitted that she was pregnant from him, which was the biggest embarrassment. He had to embarrass himself publicly in front of everybody. But what was the purpose? Because he was not going to have 3 people die on his sake. In other words, what was he willing to do? Complete disintegration, the surrender, the non-existent, the ability to abnegate yourself for something bigger than you. Not to be something, but to become not. To become, the power of Yehuda is modem, is the bowing down Tasha. And that's the secret of Malchus Bais David. Its power is not in its glamour and light and charisma. Its power is in its bittul, tachlis habittul, ultimate. The Rebbe says in a mimer. The greatness on the Hey Teves mimer, in the last Hey Teves mimer that we have, that the Rebbe gave us for the last year, the last sif in the mimer, is the greatness of Mashiach. He is going to be the greatest scholar ever to live, because he's going to teach Torah to everybody. No one in the world will match Mashiach in scholarship. He's going to teach everybody. All the Tanoim, Amaroim, everybody's going to come study by him. Yet you're going to turn around and wonder where he is, and you're going to see him sitting with simple people teaching them Aleph Bais. And he's going to have no problem actually sitting and teaching the most simplest of people, because Mashiach is the epitome of humility, which means it's not about him. It's not about him teaching. It's about everybody else. And if this person needs a clarification in the deepest Zohar, this person needs a clarification in the deepest Sugya and Shas and Tosfos and Rush and Reb Kiva Eger and who knows what, and the other person can't figure out the difference between a Tes and a Mem, Mashiach holds it just as important to teach him the difference, to spend the time maybe, and the guy has a klutz head, and he can't figure it out. Mashiach is going to read it with him 100 times to explain to him the difference between a Tes and a Mem, and not feel in any way that he's wasting his time, because it's nothing to do with him. Bittul betachlis, nullification. Yehuda, David HaMelech. David says, "Vanoichi telas." I'm a worm. Total bittul. Bittul. That's the quality. The quality is bittul. That's why the quality of the third Bais Hamikdash is that it's going to be completely not just the third Bais, all Bais Hamikdashes. It's going to be stone. Stone doesn't have any quality. The quality of stone is its silence. It's bittul. It's nullification. Now, in Yiddishkeit itself, as I mentioned earlier, these two philosophies, these two energies, Chaim, these two energies, the energies of these two powers, the powers of self-development and the power of abnegation. Oh, that's right. We were doing Mazel Tov already but this is in L'chaim. Mazel Tov and Mazel Tov. And his baby was so anxious, and he decided that he's not waiting, even though he was, according to plan, he was supposed to hang out another 2-3 weeks. And he decided that he wants to be in the world for Hey Teves. He says, if you're going to come in any time, ufaratzta peretz. No, ma peratzta lecha peretz. This is the yontiv of peretz. Peratzta, breaking all boundaries for Hey Teves. That's it. L'chaim. You should have a lot of Chassidish Nachas from him. Any case, back to what we were saying. Is that these two dynamics, as they make their way in Judaism itself, is the conflict between the sages ask the question, which one is greater, deed or Torah? Which one is greater, deed or Torah? Talmud or action or Maisa? Maisa Gadol or Talmud Gadol? So the sages say Talmud Gadol because they say that Torah study is greater because it brings to action. However, in Chassidus it says when Mashiach will come, it will be Maisa Gadol. It won't only be Talmud Gadol Shemei B'dei Maisa, but Maisa will actually be Gadol than Talmud, even in the literal sense. Action. So these two phenomena of action and Talmud, Torah and Talmud, is a difference between Yosef. Is a difference between Yosef and Yehuda. Yosef's energy is primarily the energy of study, of Torah study, development, growth. Now, even though Yosef, of course, did all the mitzvahs, but his main energy was the energy of self-refinement and elevation. Even his mitzvahs that he did was when you did a mitzvah to help him in his refinement. So his ma'isa was a continuation kind of his Talmud, of his learning. Yehuda was the one who set up the yeshiva in Mitzrayim. So Yehuda sat and learned Torah. But Yehuda's quality that makes Yehuda who Yehuda is a bit. Another thing about Yehuda I forgot to mention is that Yehuda is the one who takes responsibility for Binyamin. Avdecha ora vesanar. He takes responsibility. What is taking responsibility? Responsibility means, Yehuda, what does he say to Yosef? Let me stay a servant by you and let the boy go up. So listen, you know what that means? You know what that means? In Mitzrayim, nobody ever was freed. Yehuda was accepting upon himself to become a slave, wiping out his entire lineage. Think about it. He's supposed to be the king of the Jewish people and Mashiach. Everything Yehuda. He's willing to give it all up for another person. That's the power of bittul, becoming completely exiting yourself to the ultimate. Not only that was he giving up. It says, and Rashi says that he tells Yaakov Avinu, I'm giving up this world. If I don't bring him home to you, I'm giving up this world and my portion to the world to come. You think about it. The Yosef world never gives up Olam Haba. The whole Yosef philosophy is you make yourself the most you can so that you can end up in the spiritual world and you can attain Olam Haba. That's the whole ancient Jewish philosophy based on self-development. You become so developed and then you go, ultimately you're going to have Olam Haba. But we know that anybody who lives in the Alter Rebbe's school, in the Alter Rebbe's marketplace, on the Alter Rebbe's school bus, anybody who's sitting on the Alter Rebbe's school bus, who learned Tanya, learned Chassidus, it doesn't get a thrill if you tell him you're going to get a nice Olam Haba. It doesn't speak to us. When you tell someone who learns the Alter Rebbe Siddim that you can go over there and you can do a mitzvah with another yid, and you do a mitzvah, and the guy is literal. That's his Olam Haba. His Olam Haba. He's thrilled. He met a yid who never put on tefillin. He put on tefillin with him. You couldn't give him. He gave you a million Olam Habas. You don't care. You can take your Olam Haba. You can jump with your. We don't care. No one needs Olam Haba. Why? Even though Chassidus explains Olam Haba more than anybody else, it explains what means thrills. Because the energy of Hasidism is the energy of bittul, self-transcendence, complete nullification for somebody, for someone else, for something bigger than you, nullification to God, nullification to another Jew. The famous story of the Alter Rebbe when he heard the baby crying, which the Rebbe, right, is that he even though the Alter Rebbe tells his son, the Mittler Rebbe, that when you never get caught up in your own spirituality, that you don't hear a child cry, you don't hear another person in need. It's the ability of completely going out of yourself and beyond yourself. But where is it coming from? So the Rebbe explains, it comes from because Hasidism plugs in to the essence of God. And in the essence of God, there is nothing but God. And that's why on that level, everything, all of Yiddishkeit and if you look at all aspects of how Hasidus sees all of Judaism, it's all from the perspective of bittul. Now, let's not take away the Alter Rebbe is the genius of geniuses. The Alter Rebbe is Torah study like you've never seen. He makes a Shulchan Aruch, he makes Tanya, he's a goyin, he's a goyin shebegeyonim. But the Alter Rebbe's entire genius and entire Torah study, what's the message of every mimer of every parak of Tanya? Not the self-development. The message of every line in Tanya is the bittul. Even when the Alter Rebbe is taking you onto journeys of ecstasy, the Alter Rebbe a lot of times in his memorim takes you to enormous journeys of ecstasy, of the soul experiencing the awesomeness of the Ein Sof. And your soul is on fire, and you're burning with a passion, with a desire to dissolve into God's light. What's always the message in the end? If you fulfill your own desires and wants, garnished. At that moment, you got to do shuv. You got to stop and ask yourself, what does God want? What does Hashem want? Every minor of the Alter Rebbe comes to that ending. Go back into the world and light up the world. Do something that God wants you to do, even if it's not fireworks, and even if you're not thrilling to your neshama. Go do what the Eibishter wants you to do. That always dominates in the Alter Rebbe's philosophy. And even, for instance, Judaism in general, if from the philosophy of Yosef thinking, we give all kinds of reasons why God created the world. And part of it is so that he can do good to us, and we can grow, and we can reach the ultimate shleimus, and we can have the ultimate good. It's about us. The Alter Rebbe's purpose for creation, God has a taiva. And what does God get? God has a taiva, meaning God has a desire to have a home in this physical world. And what is God going to have when he has a home in the physical world? I don't know. It's his taiva. That's what God wants. And why am I living my whole life? To fulfill God's taiva. Do I have anything from it? No. But it's God's taiva. It's a complete non-beingness because it's relating to God's essence. And now I just want to bring it back because later if we can talk longer and really unpack this, because there's a lot to unpack over here. But I just want to say one thing. The entire ability for Napoleon to exist and for for communism and so on and so forth, it can only exist in a system that is where creation is hooked up to the external element of God, from God's revelations, from the giluyim of the Orein Sof. If in other words, if we're only tapping the revealed side of God, God's lights and God's revelations, God's lights and God's revelations have a limit because Hashem set up a system where the lower worlds get darker and darker and darker and darker. So at the bottom world, you can have someone who ignores God, who fights God. So the whole uniqueness, the whole ability for a Napoleon to exist, or for the communists to exist, for people to fight the Eibishter and so on and so forth, is they can only stand up against godliness that's coming from chitzonius of Keser, from the external part of Keser, which leaves room for something other to exist other than Hashem. Even in the Yiddishkeit, it's a Yiddishkeit that allows for somewhat of a metzias, somewhat of a something. Once you unplug, however, pnimius of Keser, the innermost of Keser, which is ein oid molvadei mamish, there's nothing but God, then there is not possible that there should be anything in the world that opposes godliness. Let me put it this way. Something can oppose the light of God, but nothing can oppose the truth of God. The emes of Elokus is the emes of everything. And therefore, Dafka the Alter Rebbe and his philosophy, and Dafka that can take down, that's the Yanatseach. Only Malchus Bais David can fight the final evil and transform the darkest evil and take it down completely. However, I just want to just bring it so that we can see the connection. Within Hasidus Chabad itself, within Hasidus Chabad, which is Yehuda, which is not Yosef, which is Malchus Bais David, the Alter Rebbe and all the Rabbeim are the Yosef Shebe Yehuda. They're the higher spheres. In Chabad Hasidism, there's 10, we speak about 10 spheres, and the higher spheres, they're all like the Alter Rebbe's Chachma, and Mittel Rebbe's Bina, and the Tzemach Tzedek is Das, and the other Rabbeim are various different. And therefore, in their Hasidus and in their Hasidim and in their Hasidus, there was a lot of, the Torah is a Torah of Bittul, but yet there's so much experience. It's davening for hours. It's Avas Hashem. It's Yiras Hashem. Chassidim were refined, were elevated. The whole Avodah was an Avodah Pnimis of transformation. It was transformation with Bittul, but still it was an Avodah of experience of self. The Rebbe is Malchus. So the Rebbe is the Yehuda of the Yehuda. Maisa. That's why in the Rebbe's Chassidus, the top priority by the Rebbe is always, okay, you'll tell me about you later. What's going on in your community? What are you doing for your neighbors? What are you doing in your shul? How many people did you put tefillin on? How many people did you eat matzah? Did you talk to the goyim of the non-Jews about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach? How much did you affect the world? The Rebbe is not interested. I mean, it's good. Tell me. You need to learn. He asks you always. But the whole learning and the davening is so that you can have more bittul, so you can do more mitzvahs. You can reach more yidden. You can affect the world more. The Rebbe's avodah was completely the avodah of Malchus, which Malchus is complete bittul, which I didn't have time to explain till now. It's bittul sheba bittul. However, and this is the very, very important thing, you can only have the Maila of Malchus, which is the Maila of bittul, only after Malchus receives from the higher spheres. That's why did the Eibishter make the system that first there is a system that Yosef has to be king? I forgot to mention, all this is based on the concept that in the parsha, in the conflict of Yosef and Yehuda, who's the one who rules? Who becomes king? Yosef is king, and Yehuda is subservient. Yehuda bows down to him. Yehuda is not the king. Yehuda is clearly the loser. Yosef is the one. They have a confrontation, and then suddenly they're speechless. They can't talk. Yosef turns out the winner. He's dominating. He supports them. He's the ruler over Mitzrayim. They're under his administration completely. They're under him. However, in the Haftorah, what do we read in the Haftorah of Parshas Vayigash? We read the opposite. The end of the Haftorah in Parshas Vayigash is that Hashem tells the Navi Yecheskel to take two staffs and put Yosef and Yehuda together. And in the end, the David Avdi Nasi Lahem La'olam, that David will be the king. In other words, Yosef will be integrated into Yehuda, which means these are the earliest times of history. Yosef dominates, but as we get to Messianic times, that's when it flips over. But why did the Eibishter make it that way? If Yehuda is greater, we can always have just Yehuda avodah. The answer is, again, it's a very deep answer, but the answer is that the Maila of Malchus and the Maila of Bittul can only, and the Maila of simple Yidden, the simple Jews, can only come after there is an avodah of Yosef. And that the Malchus has to receive from all the higher spheres. Only after, we're gonna maybe get to that in a moment. Only after Malchus receives and there's input from all the higher spheres, and Malchus is clearly then subservient to the higher spheres, only afterwards can the true quality of Malchus come out. And therefore, in the Bais of Mishkan, there was first the Mishkan when you had Daimim Tzemeach Chai, the inanimate. Only in the end you have the Bais of Mishkan, which means, in terms as it formulates amongst the Rabbeim of Chabad, that the Rebbe who's Malchus has to be the last of the 7 Rabbeim. And all of their energy has to flow into him. Primarily his father-in-law, whose name is Yosef. And his father-in-law, if you know the Friedrich Rebbe, the father-in-law is the ultimate. The Friedrich Rebbe is the ultimate of experience. If you read his sichos, it's dripping with emotion, with experience, with revelation. You don't have that in the Rebbe sichos at all. And then the Friedrich Rebbe is Yesoid. It's all the energy of the previous. And what is it of the Friedrich Rebbe? It's the Friedrich Rebbe's library. It's Talmud. It's Sfarim. It's books. It's the Talmud level that's flowing into Malchus. In order for the ultimate victory for Mashiach to happen, Yosef and Yehuda need to be together, and Yosef has to become integrated into Yehuda. In other words, everything flows to the Malchus, and Malchus receives everything, and then Malchus elevates everything into the Shirish of Malchus, which is higher than all the other spheres, way above. But first, it has to receive. When they wanted to take the Talmud, the Sfarim, away from the Rebbe, what they're really trying to, first of all, they're trying to separate that the Rebbe is not the heir of the Friedrich Rebbe. So they're trying to cause a wedge between Talmud and Maisa, between Yosef and Yehuda. And the Rebbe basically saw it as a fight of Klippa to cut the Rebbe's lifeline off. Mamish, you don't even realize how serious this was. To literally cut off, because Malchus is the moon, it receives everything from the sun. To snip this connection, God forbid. So the Didan Natzach is the fusion of allowing for Yosef and Yehuda to merge together, for the library to merge. But if you think, the Nikud over here is, when Mashiach comes, it's not about just, we're going to flip to just Bittul. We're going to flip Talmud as well. That Talmud is going to become it's like we said earlier, the Alter Rebbe's form of Talmud. A Talmud, a Bittul Digger learning, a Maisa Digger learning. That's why I was thinking that the Yom Tiv of Hey Teves, although it's the Yom Tiv of the books of Torah, number one, it's the Yom Tiv of the Sfarim, of books. It's not the Yom Tiv of learning, it's the Yom Tiv of books. What's the books? The books is the Maisa part. It's the physical side of the Torah. It's not the Yom Tiv of the Lundis. It's the Yom Tiv of Torah books. Because books is the Maisa part. It's the physical part of the Talmud. And what we're buying books, filling your home with books. But also, the Hayra the Rebbe takes from in the last mimer we got from the Rebbe regarding Hey Teves is that amazing. Is that when you're teaching Torah, although usually when a teacher teaches, it's very much about the teacher, because the teacher is teaching and the teacher is extending himself to the students. But the ultimate objective in your teaching should not be the way Talmud teaches, which Talmud likes to express itself and to be, and I said a good word, and I said something good, and so on and so forth. But your main concern in when you're teaching should not be that you're teaching, but that should be that the student is receiving. In other words, to have the bittul of Maisa in the Talmud. And the Rebbe says that's the takeaway. That's the takeaway of Yigash El of Yehuda. That Yosef should be elevated into Yehuda's world. That even Talmud should be made into Yehuda's perspective. That a learning which is not a learning of, and if you think about it, those who opposed the Rebbe's and fought the war and brought the whole fight against the Rebbe on Hey Teves was the Rebbe's nephew, the family of Yosef still, but who was resenting the Rebbe's leadership because the Rebbe's tachlis of Bittul. But there's deeper than that. I'm not going to say who it was, but there was a whole group of people in the world, Jews, religious people, who were supporting this movement and were trying to fight the Rebbe. What bothers this group the most about Lubavitch? What bothered this group the most about Lubavitch is Lubavitch goes out and does and reaches non-religious Jews. They're a very segregated type of a group. They're very into being in your own quarters and being holy and protecting the walls of holiness and keeping from the from. This whole idea of going out, and to them, going out to secular people was like going out to wicked people, going out. So there was a certain tarnishing. You're tarnishing the image of from Yidden. There's from Yidden, there's religious Jews. Chabad has this notion of doing what? Starting from the Alter Rebbe, that when a baby is crying, you can never be caught in your religiosity, not to hear a baby cry, which means it doesn't matter you. You don't even matter here at all. There's someone else that needs. In other words, a perspective of Bittul. What they couldn't, you see, here's the thing. When you live in a Yosef world, when you live in a world of Metzias, of something, and you watch Bittul, and you never studied it, and you don't know what the thrill of Bittul is, it annoys you very much. Because you look at Bittul as like, what? Like, Stam, you're going to go. It nullifies your own existence. So,
people don't realize how ancient that makes you become.
Yes.
It's a death.
Literally think it's a death. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the whole opposition to the Rebbe as being the seventh Rebbe of Lubavitch was not being able to tolerate the bittul of the Rebbe, the total nothingness, the total surrender of self to someone else, which is where Talmud needs to go. Talmud needs to melt into Maisa. The whole world of Talmud needs to surrender itself to Maisa. When the world of Talmud surrenders itself to deed, then deed liberates Talmud, then the problem with Talmud is that even though Talmud is self-development and self-refinement, but since you're stuck in yourself, then you can only perceive and only understand to a certain degree. You're limited in understanding. But when the scholar reaches a level of bittul and nullification and lets go of his or her own existence and nullifies themselves to the cause that's much bigger than them, then the restrictions of the Talmud also leave. And then your understanding can be infinite, can be beyond. So in order for Talmud to ultimately be the ultimate Talmud, the Talmud of Mashiach, the Talmud needs to dissolve into Maisa, into action, and to appreciate the world of action. And that's when Talmud is, but Talmud, before it tastes what bittul is, which bittul really liberates you from your own metzias and makes you one with God, before Talmud tastes it, it feels very threatened by it. So Yosef types of Jews get very nervous from Yehuda Yidden. And that's where the friction is. That's what irritated from the very beginning Hasidism. So really, let's put it this way. From the Baal Shem Tov is when Yehuda Yiddishkeit started. Bittul Yiddishkeit started, nullification. That's why Hasidim weren't into the way they look and the way they dress. They came across sometimes a little slobby and a little this. And it was bothered people. Like, how do you not have self-respect? And how does your shirt out? And how come, the Chassid went and he got so simchadig by the Farbrengen and he rolled over in the Farbrengen and he went into the sauce and his ketchup went on him and his whole hat smashed. That's because Hasidism always had this energy of like breaking out of self, breaking out of the limitation. But someone who's into the self-development looks at it from the side and just doesn't get it. It's the same story you see that by David HaMelech. David HaMelech's wife, who was an aristocrat, looks out of the window and she sees David dancing. She's also embarrassed with him. She's the daughter of Shaul. Same concept. Shaul is from the family of Yosef. He's Binyamin's descendant. He's from that range. They don't get it. Bittul is not appealing until you taste the sweetness of bittul. Because the real power of bittul is that bittul is the ultimate one with God himself. So this is the dynamics. And therefore, in order for the ultimate victory to happen, there has to be a unification of Talmud and Maisa. And for that reason, we land on Hey Teves, because Hey Teves is when. So that's what that resolves the contradiction of Hey Teves. On the one hand, Hey Teves is in all Hasidus it speaks about in the Hayom Yom about the Anashim Pshutim and the simple people, and Maisa Gadol, and yet the Yom Tov is not a Yom Tov of Mitzrayim, it's a Yom Tov of Sfar, because the Yom Tov is to take It's really the theme of this week's Haftarah. The whole Hey Teves is take the tree of Yosef and melt it into Yehuda's tree. Have Yehuda dominate Yosef's, so that the Meiser should dominate over the Talmud. And that's Hasidism. The ultimate victory of Hasidism, which is the ultimate victory, the ultimate purpose of creation, which only from that total bittul can you defeat communism, can you defeat Napoleonism, can you defeat all these inyanim. So the Didan Natzach of Hey Teves is really the Didan Natzach, the ultimate victory of Mashiach. And that's why once Didan Natzach happened, the Geula was ready to come. Now we just have to get over our self-doubts. That's literally what's left of us to do right now. Because there's no more klippas. There's no real klippas anymore. Now the klippas are only created by us questioning. That's the whole clip. If we can only somehow figure out how can knock Chabad out of this stupor of questioning, and everybody just saying, hey, we know where Mashiach, what Mashiach is, and just get clarity in it, we're done. It's fartik. This whole narishkeit is because we're just stuck in this spiral of, Gimel Tammuz happened, and we don't know, and therefore what? Hayesh Hashem b'kerbeinu, is Hashem amongst us? Is Mashiach amongst us? Because there's no more real klippas anymore, because that has ended. Fartik. There's no more, the Rebbe said, there's no more bitter. There's nothing that needs to be fixed anymore. The only thing is we have to fight that which opposes holiness and eliminate it, which is, meaning that which is here to just oppose just for the sake of opposing, that has to be destroyed. So this is kind of what was supposed to be the nutshell. But then each one of these points needs to really be discussed and explained at length so we understand it, how it works in each level, like how it all comes together. First of all, regarding Yosef and Yehuda in general, regarding learning and mitzvahs in general, and then how it plays out that the first part of history it works one way, and second part of history it starts working the other way. Why it needs to be first the Yosef dominate. It's the same idea like the soul has to dominate over the body. But ultimately the body is going to, in Mashiach's world, the body is going to be 1,000,000 times higher than the soul. Not 1,000,000, ain't self higher than the soul. And this body is going to lift the soul into the ultimate truth of God. But if you would take a body and try to put it directly into it, the body would be a total mess. Because since the body has the secret, Malchus has the secret of being the ultimate Metzias and being the ultimate Bittel. That's the secret of Gashmi. We say Gashmi is called diamond, it's silent. But on the other hand, it's the biggest Metzias. It screams, I am. So it's both. It is and it's not. So first you have to bang it down a little bit till you infuse the emes, which comes from the neshama, which comes from the Yosef's truths. You enlighten the body, but then the body gets much smarter than not smarter, gets far more in tuned with God, much more than the soul can ever, because the body has the quality of bittul. Body is Yehuda. Yosef is neshama. And neshama, in the beginning, it has to be that Yosef dominates over guf. Only Mashiach Satan is when the guf becomes higher than the body. But then the neshama has to learn the bittul from the body. It's the same fusion. This is the thing. And here is the wedge that wanted to be created. On Hey Teves, there was a wedge that wanted to be created between Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Between this and, yes. L'chaim. What?
Like Mordechai, you see Yehudi, Shemini.
Yeah, Shimon. Yeah. Yeah.
Energy is one person.
I don't know how. I have to shut off the whole thing. It's the new system. Okay, so the Rebbe should help you. They should do it says that Rebbe should have listened to the Oid Drachim. You're not Oid. It's a different story. So for you, for sure. Yes. Should be better than ever. Better than ever. Chaim. Amen. Wow, Yena Shal Taida. Yes. The Nakuda is really just one Nakuda, is that there is the system of what's called Seder Ishtalshalas, the order of evolving worlds. From the system of order of evolving worlds, the spiritual is higher than the physical, and you live in a world of perfection. That's all from Seder Ishtalshalas. And the mile of the point of the Alter Rebbe and Chassidus is that it brings the Alter Rebbe and Chassidus bring to the world the perspective of, and not just it brings the godliness milamayla meseder ishtalshalos, from above the entire evolving order, and the system from above the entire evolving order is the pure essence or the infinite, the perspective from the infinite. That's what Chassidus is, and from that level, it turns all of Judaism topsy-turvy, upside down. And that's Mashiach's reality.
Not just
And
within
Chabad itself, it goes through a system as well. There's a Seder Ishtalshalos within Chabad, and Dafka Malchus, which is the last and final stage, is rooted in the essence of essence. It's almost like all the Rabbeim are only a preparation for the Rebbe. They flow into the Rebbe, and then the Rebbe, because he's rooted in the essence, is elevated to his source, and he lifts them all up with him into the source. So it's like everything is a preparation from the Rebbe, what's this called? Rebbe Avram Paris, amazing chassid. There's a sefer called Echad Haya Avram. On the back of his sefer, there's letters of his. And he writes there, it's amazing words. He says, well, we have no idea what kind of Rebbe we have. We have no idea, he says. He says, imagine, he says, all the Chabad Rabbeim, this was a chassid, it was a chassid. He says, they're such bears. He says, he wants to speak about how great they're bears, like a bear. But they're all, he says, like weekday compared to Shabbos. You understand the difference? He says, weekday and Shabbos, can you even make this is Malchus, this is Shabbos, this is like, this is the seventh one. Kol Shevuyim Chavivim. It's like the seventh are special. It's on levels that we have no comprehension. It's like, that's a little bit. Just to clarify, just to get a little bit of what I saw in the Mimer today, which is the secret of Malchus, the secret of Bittul, is that all the spheres, all the attributes, which bring about all the gazillions of worlds and gazillions of levels, are all coming from the emanations of Hashem, from the lights of Hashem. The light of Hashem means it's an emanation, it's a revelation of Him. So it's a revelation of Him, it's about Him. It's about His revelation, about how He reveals Himself, and so on and so forth. And each world, here's Hashem's wisdom, and here's Hashem's understanding, and here's Hashem's compassion. Hashem. So it's all related to God's presence and being. Okay? But then the Rebbe says, but Malchus is rooted higher than the divine expressions, higher than Hashem's revelations. It's rooted in Hashem's essence. Why? What does Malchus do? Malchus steps away and clears space and makes room for something else to exist. So Malchus, hear this, Malchus takes the Eibishter and makes God be not. Literally, it makes God be not. God steps out the space where it's not God. It's not an expression of God. It's something else. The creations come about. We exist. We exist. We, not God, is existing here. At least in our perspective. So much we have free choice. We have a complete self. How can that be? That too is coming from God. But from where is it coming from God? It's coming from a place in God where God doesn't have to be in order to be. He can be not, and he still is. And that's his essence, which is much deeper than needing to be. So imagine this. So Malchus is rooted in Atzmos because only in the essence of the Ein Sof, it doesn't have to be in order to be. He can be Behelim, he can be not, and yet it doesn't make a difference. He is, he's Behelim, he's revealed. In the levels of divine projection, it emanates, it's all about beingness. Oh, so being that the higher spheres are all emanations of Hashem's beingness, so they create a mindset of, in the recipients who receive from Neshamis, Malachim, all souls, angels, everybody who receives from these sphirot of attributes, which are all about God displaying who he is and all his greatness and his beauty and his, what kind of creations does it create, or what kind of beings does it create? Beings who also value self-expression, self-development, a self. But only Malchus and the creatures that come from Malchus, which the creatures that have come from Malchus at first glance are the least godly because they have yeshus, they have substance, they have self. But they come from Atzmos all the way down to the physical world. It comes from God's very essence, which God's essence has bittul. In other words, the more you're reaching God's essence, the more he can be not. So in that, when he is not, what happens? A stone is suddenly here. And the stone is. But guess what? Because the stone is created from Hashem's essence, where Hashem could be not, the stone also has, and only the material physical world has that ability to be completely not. Spirituality always inserts itself into everything. So on the one hand, usually we say on the more external level that the spiritual worlds are far more humble and far more recognizing source. The physical is so stuck in itself. But on a much deeper level, the physical has the ultimate secret of non-being. But the physical, you have to tinker with it a little bit in order for it to show you its side of bittul. That its existence is not its existence is God's existence. In other words, what is the physical saying? The physical is, but why is the physical is? Because God's essence can express himself in not being by allowing someone else to be. So that is God. So the Eibishter's truth is expressed in the rock. So initially the rock thinks it exists because it thinks it is. But at a certain point, it recognizes that it's God's truth that it is hiding. And therefore, what happens to the rock? It's the ultimate silence. It's silenced and it's buckled to the highest bittul, expressing God's ultimate existence. So, for that reason, Dafka, the Alter Rebbe's perspective, and Dafka, which is the Davidic, which is Malchus based David, which is Mashiach's perspective. That's the point. It's Mashiach's reality. It's the world of Bais David. It's so challenging to the rest of Judaism. It's so different. And that's the reason why a lot of those who do not allow themselves, those who only, look at Chabad from a distance and wonder and look at it, they end up with a lot of questions and a lot of objections. But you have to go a little closer. You got to let yourself go a little closer. You got to start learning and studying, and then you realize, wow, this is like something else. This is something else. And then suddenly you enter into a whole new world because Chassidus opens up not the external of the divine, but the internal of the divine. And you're seeing everything from the perspective of Atzmos, everything from the perspective of Or Ein Sof. And all of existence, and therefore the Torah, the entire Torah becomes a Torah of bittul, becomes a philosophy of nullification, of non-beingness. And that's the ultimate being, the ultimate existence. And that's the struggle of Yosef and Yehuda. And as we said earlier, that's why the Yom of today says that Melech HaMashiach will reveal the quality of the simple Jew. Now, the simple Jew is simple in his acknowledgement of God. And that simplicity and that simple acknowledgement is a pure surrender. One that philosophy and the mind and sophistication doesn't get close to.
I think the battle you're speaking of
Yes.
is always for somebody who grew up in the world of Yosef.
Yes, for sure. For those who grew up in a world of Yehuda, then it's chatchila that way.
For those
Yes.
he has only he has to negate so much that he grew up with.
Yes.
The Tshuva landed into the Rebbe's world.
Yeah.
And this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
That is what Yiddishkeit is. It's the all Yiddishkeit, and this is Yiddishkeit. Yehuda, that's what we came into.
Yeah.
We
Chaim.
have a lot of negating we had to go through.
Yeah. Chaim. So this all this talk that we Farbrengen there tonight needs a lot more. Huh? When everything flows into the bittul of Yehuda, then your tkifus becomes the tkifus of the Eberster himself. And when your tkifus becomes the tkifus of the Eberster himself, then dida natzach. It's not shaykh for it to be a victory on the other side. If there's still a vestige of self there, if there's still a vestige of Metzias there, so then there are certain things that you can fight and win, and certain things that crush you. But was finished with the bittul of the Rebbe. The Rebbe's ultimate bittul. Because he's the Malchus. He's the Malchus of the system of Malchus. If I would dare to say, I would say that the Alter Rebbe is Chachma Shebe Malchus. In other words, it's all the whole Chassidus Chabad and all Chassidus Baal Shem Tov from the beginning is all the Torah. It's all the feminine Torah. It's all the Torah from Sfiras HaMalchus. It's all already the Eshes Chayil Ateres Baila. It's all already the Torah of Guf being higher than Neshama. Of my what? Yeah. The whole system is Oretz Kadmo. That Malchus Kol Olam. It's all the. So it's like on Rosh Hashanah, we build the Malchus. We draw Chachma Sheba Malchus and Malchus. So this was all the generations until now, it was all constructing the Rebbe's Malchus, the final generation of Malchus. And Hey Teves is the Rebbe's Yom Tov and the Hey Teves is the merging of the earlier generations into the Rebbe. Because the federal court says that this library, which belongs to the Farbrengen Rabbeim, and its library, its Torah, its Yosef, all of that is now the possession. Oh, wait. Think about it. We take it now a step deeper. What won the court? What won the court was coming from the Rebbe's and also Malchus. And what did she say? She said that the Rebbe and the books belong to the Chassidim. What does that mean? That's exactly this point. It's that the Rebbe is totally bottle. He has no Metzias. That's Malchus. Malchus. Where did you ever have a Rebbe, which is a Rav? Usually when a Rav, when a Rosh Hashiva had students, the Rosh Hashiva wasn't about the students. The students were here to allow the Rosh Hashiva to say his lamdas. In other words, this is such a guy and he needs a yeshiva. If he has a yeshiva, he can be Megala, his guyness. He can reveal his guyness. But to say that this entire Metzias of the Rosh Hashiva, of the Rav, is the students, that he belongs to them without any Metzias, that's the Chiddush over here. So that's why this was the winning of the case. It was this brought out, and she brought it out. Who brought it out? Dafka the Rebbetzin, because she's within the Rebbe itself. The Rebbe is the Mashpia, and she's the Malchus. So she's the Malchus Shebe Malchus of the Malchus of every level of Malchus is the Rebbetzin. And she says that that the Rebbe himself, and she says it about the Frierdiker Rebbe, because that's the whole point, to reveal that even Yosef is now part of Yehuda's world. The integration of Yosef in Yehuda. That Yosef also understands that his imagine someone who develops and learns and knows, but it has nothing to do with him. It's just so that he can teach others without, and it's not even that he should teach, it's that the others should be taught, not he should teach. Yeah, he gives him real chayas. That's right. He revives him because real life is only when there's total bittul. Because v'chachma tichya, where chachma gives life, chachma is kayach ma. Where there is, in other words, and where you melt into atzmas, when you melt into, and think about it. You think the thing about Malchus is that it's ultimate mitzias and it's ultimate bittul. The king is the ultimate Metzias, yet he's the ultimate bittul. David HaMelech had to bow down in the Bais Hamikdash the entire time. I'm thinking that when Mashiach comes and it says the Eibishter will be revealed. I know I'm saying some very intense stuff over here, but the Eibishter will be revealed. God, Atzmas will be revealed. Atzmas doesn't have any tzir. What do you mean Atzmas is revealed? Where is he revealed? What are you seeing? What are you seeing? You seeing Atzmas? What Atzmas is? What does it mean Atzmas will be revealed? What does it mean, Maya? What does it mean Atzmas? The Alter Rebbe says, that's it. Where's Gili of Atzmas? Your eyes will see your teacher. When the Rebbe said about the Frierdiker, you're looking at the Frierdiker Rebbe, you're seeing Atzmas Malubish Beguvan. And he will teach us how we can look at ourselves and also see Atzmas. Because we'll be Megala, the Etzem Anashama, which is Atzmas, inside all of us. So here you have a person who represents the ultimate Metzias of the Eibishter. At the same time, he's a non-being at all. He's a person who's Moisa Nefesh, total bittul for anybody. As we said earlier, Mashiach will teach Torah to the Rebbe says it to the most simplest of people. While he has the greatest lamdanim waiting for the deepest mysteries of Torah, the Kabbalists are waiting in one room, and the other room is waiting, but all the Geoinim are waiting. And where's Mashiach? He's sitting with the simplest of people. And I saw a story that the Rebbe was in France in Tufshin, Tufshin Vav, I think. And he went to pick up his mother, Zion. So the Rebbe was in France, and there was a Farbrengen there. And it says particularly over there, this person from Belgium related the story, and he says that the Deja Dynasty, from the family of the Maria Cheskel, was sitting over there, and everybody was stunned. The Rebbe was like speaking deep Torah, like on, and people were like, and the Rebbe suddenly was crying. Like what? What was he crying? He said the Alter Rebbe lived in Liadi, and he had Chassidim, and the Mittler Rebbe was Oisikin, and he had Chassidim, and he was Oisikin, revealing secrets of Torah, like just in the Shver. The Rebbe says the Rebbe the Shver is sitting in New York, and that it iced sich up, and he's pulling himself away from Yehudi Allah, from Zayne Inyanim, from his Inyanim, which is Yehudi Allah and Yehudi Tata, the higher unity and the lower. That's his Inyanim. When they led him to mention with Yidden Aleph Bais, that it was crying that he's teaching, he's sitting and learning with people Aleph Bais. This is the bittul of Yehuda. So as much as the Rebbe is saying it on the Frierdiker Rebbe, but it reaches its zenith and its ultimate thing in Malchus. Total nicht Metzias, and yet yet complete Metzias. But complete Nisht Metzias, meaning complete Bittel for anybody and anything. And what becomes primary in everything is that someone else should have, and someone else should learn, and someone else should know. And that is infinitely more important even than I should know, and I should know, and I should learn, and so on and so forth. Total nullification. Yes. L'chaim. L'chaim u'lebracha. It's, I think so.
New setup is a whole next level.
Chaim, good Yom Tif. We should see the complete Geula now. So you can shut it. I have to go over these in Yan. I'm still in a share to develop it, share it.